You're listening to Conversations Along the Way, part of the Stoic Mom Project. At the SMP, we embrace the Stoic principle of the obstacle is the way, or that we can take the hardest things in our lives and use them as a way to learn and grow into the best versions of ourselves. If you're here, there's a good chance you're what I like to call a growth-oriented, non-affirming parent of a trans-identified young person. I'm Stoic Mom, a life coach who is also a growth-oriented, non-affirming parent of an adult trans-identified daughter. I've committed to having guests on this podcast who bring messages of healing. I invite professionals who I believe have expertise that can help you regain solid ground and reframe this circumstance in a way that supports you to learn and grow from it. I also invite other parents who found healthy ways to navigate this destabilizing circumstance, whose stories and strategies may inspire you. Today's guest is one of these parents. I hope you find value in healing ideas from our conversation. Well, how long have you been at the Stoic Mom Project? Like how
Um,
do you find yourself there? Do you remember how you
I
came
feel
across
like
it?
I was reading a blog, I was on another Substack, and I think I saw you comment, and I think you used the name Stoic Mom, and
Mm,
got the sense that you were probably writing somewhere, or maybe you mentioned you write somewhere, and then I searched,
great.
and
Okay.
felt really close alignment. I don't, I used to follow a lot of different people for a while, and I haven't had the really kind of dive into just because I could tell there's so much depth and wealth in there, and I'm like, I can't focus and put my attention on this at this moment. Um,
Hmm.
but it's like my next uh deep dive is to sort of go further into what you're offering and what you share. And yeah, it's a little scary for me even to contemplate that the depth that I could go, you know.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not scared, but like feels a little daunting in terms of my time and energy that
Sure.
I get consumed easily. So I
Yes.
kind of take my life slow right now. I was on such a fast track for so long. It's such this like roller coaster for forever. So
Doesn't slow feel good? I love slow. I indulge in slow and I have no qualms about it.
yeah,
So that's the way I roll these days and I love it. So I hope you find you know a that place where you can be slow or
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to listen to yourself and your own energy and to manage your input in a way that
Mhm.
nourishes you, right?
Yeah, I'm
So
a person who I suck in a lot of input, and
mhm.
did some kind of strengths finder, and I was like, I'm an input
Me too. Number one,
hungry,
input.
hungry person, and um,
Yes,
yeah, the
yes.
input, the strengths finder,
Yeah,
and yeah, so I love that about myself, but I'm also like, it can be a lot.
yeah. I studied StrengthsFinder. I
Hmm.
actually went through a coaching program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that utilized StrengthsFinder. It was my obsession for a while, and I could apply it like to uh, other passions of mine, like education and just how humans function. And
Yeah,
that's what I loved about it, and kind of the whole strengths culture idea. But it's so interesting that you bring that up because it was your comments on a couple of my recent pieces that inspired me to invite you on. And it was because I could tell that we had a similar relationship to this problem of parenting a trans-identified kiddo, right? And it can be so helpful to have others describe it because I think it can be difficult to convey to people who may not understand that you can have a different relationship with it. Does that make sense?
yeah.
So yeah. So I really do appreciate you being here, taking the time to have this conversation with me.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, and it was two in particular, and I actually have those comments up in front of me, and I will likely um, put those in the show notes, but I do want listeners to know that I know very little of your story beyond these comments at this point, right? So they'll be learning more about you along with me. So um, that similar relationship is often on the other side, I think, of tragedy. And you allude to some tragedy in your comment, and you have a beautiful way of capturing it. It's a very powerful, poignant way. And you talk about a relationship that killed you over and over again, and you were reborn each time, And so when you discovered that your adult daughter was taking testosterone, you said, I think you said, my body and soul recognized this home state of mine. Wow. um, would you mind sharing a little bit more about that? And you can decide where you want to start with that. If you want to talk about your daughter first or that other relationship that was so difficult for you.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a long-term marriage, relationship, started when I was young, and so for about, 8 years, I I discovered infidelity. Um, and me being a very rational and also empathetic person was like, this is fixable. This is about a relationship. This is not, this is about more than just, um, cheating, and
Mm-hmm.
really worked to try to learn who I was, um, and show my full self with my partner, and show the value of our connection, or value of our life. But then I had to learn the hard way that the capacity that I thought that he had was not there. It was sort of a fantasy in my head. And so, we'd go through these cycles where it felt really good, and then there would be another shocking kind of betrayal, not necessarily like more cheating, but just like a betrayal of integrity. Just would punch me over and over again, and I'd have to rise up, and I'd have like these out of body, the first time it was like these out of body experiences of, I mean, just literally feeling like ripped open and raw for a long time, and then feeling like everything kind of coalescing, and feeling almost this renewal and recovery of myself, and more. It was like I could sense, it was almost this automatic process of sense of learning more about myself, and my relationship to myself and my world, that was profound. And I didn't make a choice. It just, I mean, maybe it's sort of my personality and my who I am to kind of have that in me, but it wasn't like a thought I had. It just happened, and I think that's what profound grief and pain can do. And so I started to learn this capacity for renewal. I mean, over time, and I'm a student of trauma, so over time, it's not good. It's not good overall, right? To have it happen over and over again, it wears you down. I have health effects. I have nervous system effects that, I stayed in the system for too long. But I did see myself as a resilient. I saw myself as a resilient person, and could feel that state of resilience. And recognize, and I felt this healed self. There were these times where I felt this immense capacity for myself to just be more healed, and be more in tune and clear in the world. It wasn't always like that. Isn't always like, now I'm like in this state of bliss and enlightenment, but I just knew that the capacity was there, and I had the experience of it.
Can I pause you for a moment there, just because that's so fascinating to me? And I think do you think that's a personality type, or
where does that capacity come from? Because I can completely relate to what you're saying. And even the discovery process, that, and I've read somewhere, there's a quote, I'll have to track it down. I don't know who says it, something about the human heart having the capacity to be broken over and over again, and what I hear you describing is, and I say this sometimes, your heart was broken open, right? Like there's a difference between this sort of crushing devastation where you feel no hope for life again, I think, versus this other outcome of a broken heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is this opening, this sort of capacity. You talk about resilience, right? But it's this sort of capacity to be with difficult feelings, and that kind of becomes part of the richness of life. If that makes sense. It's not that you go out seeking tragedy, but it's this knowing that you have the capacity for tragedy. Does that make sense? And
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
where do you think that capacity?
I do think I have a personality type that probably lends itself to that, but I also, and that way I feel lucky. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think it's unavailable to most people.
Right. Good. Yeah, I'm with you. I think this, sorry, go ahead. I
Yeah,
cut you off. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and I I had this realization that there's nothing I could do cognitively to stop this onslaught of grief. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't stop it. My body took over in this way, and it was out of my control. My body
Mm.
was telling me, was doing what it needed to do. And so I had to lay in the grief. I laid on the floor. I mean, as many people will talk about laying on the floor and just feeling how deep this pain goes. And I couldn't fight it because every time I tried to fight it, it just didn't work. It didn't work. I would try and fight. I would try and fight. I would try and stop my partner from doing more damage, and it just didn't work. I would try and scheme and to come up with plans. Sometimes it was okay, but it just didn't work. I had no control. It's just this, letting go of control, that I had no choice.
Mm-hmm.
I had very little choice to, certain things I had choice in, and the things I thought I had choice in or control over, I didn't. But in laying there, it just initiated this process of coming back together in a new way, and seeing myself come back, and opening myself up to the wisdom that's right in front of me, and that I have within me, and listening more.
So I'm hearing, excuse me, this relationship with your body, right? That this was a very physical experience. And so I think in that there must be some attunement, right, to your physiology that facilitated this sort of transformation for you.
Yeah. And it wasn't by chance. I mean, literally within a day or a week of sort of the first betrayal, discovery of betrayal, I picked up a book called Waking the Tiger in my house, and was reading it, as a part of my effort to like solve this problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it taught me, this idea of how animals handle trauma and the somatic
Mm.
experience, or how animals, this freeze and this collapse that they do in nature, and what it means, and it's a good thing. It's a useful thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I could feel it in my body. I could feel my body was like, I could feel those cycles of fight, flight, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Freeze, and then collapse. And I'm like, okay, it's doing what my body is meant to do. This is what our bodies are built to do. And I just let it do it. I recognize it as just, this is a natural process.
Yeah.
And at the same time, in an effort to like take care of myself, I started going to yoga, a community yoga class,
Mm-hmm.
3 times a week. And it was in the, very low light, very, candlelit yoga kind of environment. And those two things together, just realizing I had to attune to what my body was doing and feel into it to get through this, was just, it was a lucky discovery.
A lucky discovery. I wonder if that's another way to say synchronicity.
Synchronicity, yeah.
Yes. The world kind of brought you what you needed. Yeah. And isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. A student of trauma. That's such an interesting term. You talk about an opening to yourself. That comes up in your comments. That, where did you say it? It was actually in reference to your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, let's talk about her if we could for a little bit. Can you share her age and just a little bit about you discovering what she was up to?
Well, I go with between they and she. I try to use they so that it's the one concession I'm trying to maintain not completely just say I'm not going along with any of this. I'm trying to give something back. Anyway, 19. And I think of this little baby who came home glowing. Like, I put her to bed and I could see in the dark her skin was glowing, and I think it just represents this she just felt like this mystery and magical thing that came unexpectedly, and I had just all these intense mystical magical moments being pregnant with her. And she came out and she was so into magic and mystical things and imagination, and she just always is floating in the world. And I could see this person being so otherworldly and so also into their head, and into absorbing everybody else's emotions and feelings and personas, and just just this very intense and beautiful creative creature, just powerful imagination, very powerful personality.
This sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And will for many listeners, I
and
think.
Very charismatic.
Yes.
I mean, drew in all her fellow friends because she had this wonderful imagination. Verbal, just storytelling, constantly talking about stories and steeping yourself into story all the time. And I actually, when they were in elementary school, was hearing about trans kids and this evolving way of dealing with them and bringing them in, supporting them. And it was more of an interest, like, what's going on. There was a family in our school that was featured in an article about where have all the tomboys gone, and talking about supporting tomboys. And so I was like, okay, great. People are still accepting of girls being different kind of girls. But I was looking at this, like, what's happening in the culture. My daughter, who was full on girl, driving me a little crazy with how much girl sometimes or how much
princess costumes. It's like
makeup and jewelry and wanting, so much appearance focused. I think this isn't going to be another thing. Like, I've seen her go through these like identity phases, and she was only like 8 at the time, seeing this, like, I've got this look, I'm this, I'm that, so I was like, this could be another thing she's going to be drawn to. So I almost felt like I was just like on watch for what evolves.
And this was elementary school, you said?
It's elementary school. Okay. I had no other inclination that she would be drawn to identifying as non-binary or boy at all. Nothing.
Okay.
I
You
told
were thinking tomboy. Is that what you're
she not
saying?
even tomboy, not even tomboy.
Right.
She
But as this identity that she might play with. Is that what?
no, I was thinking that she would be drawn to I'm a boy and
Oh,
playing at like I'm trans, I'm queer. I'm like, this is going to be the next costume to try on.
yes, yes. Mhm.
And even though there were no signs that she gravitated to anything, boy like. I have
Right.
a child who's a boy, and
Say that again. I'm sorry.
I have another child who's a boy,
Okay.
younger, and she would try so hard to show that she's as interested in the same things he was,
Mhm.
and denying her own, like, she didn't care that much about sports, but she would say she was, and and not that they're boy or girl things, it's just that she really didn't show any tomboyness, except she just liked to be creative and play and
Yes.
curious and read. I mean, just a nerdy, curious, smart girl.
Mhm.
Nothing I would say, is like, oh, maybe she thinks she's, maybe she could be a boy. In fact, I think like I tell people, like, if anybody came out as trans, it would have been my son. Like, into
Mm.
makeup and jewelry, and has purple was his favorite color forever, like very very gender bending. So there's no sign other than this looks like a juicy identity for
Mhm.
her.
Mhm.
But I also loved that she had this creative, imaginative side, and this just like powerful, like, persona that she just got. She got it, and she initiated a lot. She had a lot of leadership, and just showed up really bright in the world, and also, emotionally very mercurial. And I think I recognized some signs of mental health, or neuroatypical things,
Mhm.
unusual things for a while.
Around what age would you say? Were you noticing those things?
I could say, I mean, honestly, at birth, or
Okay.
young age, in that I could see how intense the world was coming in. I could see it in her face. I could see
Mm.
it in the attention she paid, very close attention to people.
Yes. Yes.
And I could look at her sleep, and I could see the brain working. The brain was
Mhm.
working. She didn't sleep well, and she'd wake up,
Mhm. Mhm.
with no sleep, and she'd have a new skill. It's like her brain was going in her sleep in this rapid way, and she'd wake up, and then
Mhm.
she'd talk, she'd learn to talk
Mhm.
overnight. So this brain
Right.
growth that was just like this intense, active brain that I saw right off the bat. But then as she got into toddlerhood and preschool, like, I could see she was having challenges with reading people's moods, feeling like people
Mhm.
out to get her, saying some strange things about, people liking her, not liking her, or reacting unusually to situations, having really deep reactions to things that felt really normal to most people, and really did not want to be parented at a very young age. Said,
Yes. Yep.
you
Yep. This all
you
sounds so familiar.
yeah,
Mhm.
I don't, you can just move me to apartment and I can take care
Yeah. Yep.
of myself.
My kid called it living the dream. Anytime she got left home alone, she was living the dream.
Yeah,
Very, yeah, just
yeah.
so independent, needed to learn things her way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah.
the thing I've struggled, I've sort of like said, this is who she is. It's a struggle, because I was like, okay, I just got to do enough so that people don't call Child Protective Services, and
Right.
I keep her from
Yep.
doing the worst to herself, and making the worst judgment. But I was like, she's gonna barrel ahead with whatever she wants, and I'm
Yeah.
not gonna have that much control. So it was difficult, but again, through her upbringing, thought maybe, she was very into her crushes, and her posters were girls, not boys, and I thought, okay, that might be the story. And but still very much affiliated with girlness, femaleness. Through high school, I got an inkling, and what I was doing, it's just like, okay, I'm going to provide as much support as I could. I mean, we struggled, but support as I could so that she could feel good in her own self, in her own body. That she can withstand all these impulses to try on new personas and just learn to be herself. And it was, that's what I tried to do. I don't know how successful I was, but tried to encourage her to do things broaden her horizons about who she is. Again, not that because she said she was non-binary, she didn't, but more like she needed an expansive view of the world because she could narrow in on an idea.
Yes.
Stuff there, and just not see beyond her perception of something. So I was really, wanting to help her, and she was very resistant to seeing things outside of her box, very rigid. So that was a struggle. And I think she was starting to check into the non-binary thing right before COVID, like her ninth grade year, because I think I picked up inklings on some things she put on social media that I saw, like, and also the other thing is she discovered social justice. And
yes,
I work in, social services world, but the way she picked up on it was very antithetical to how I understood justice, social justice. And, it was very much this identity stuff that didn't gel with me and my understanding of what really social justice. I've been working in the nonprofit field for 20 years.
Right.
And, attuned to social issues and, so this like fueled, how social media and how pop culture was fueling like these social movements in these weird ways that, these superficial ways, these performative ways. And again, she was trying it on. Okay, great. As long as she's interested. But it became very rigid, very dogmatic, and very like, it's 1984-ish, like it's like dystopia of children rising up and like, cutting off the heads of, or the Chinese Communist Children's Party kind of thing. I was like, this is weird.
Yes, but with good intentions, they absolutely think that they're doing good in the world and they want to be part of that good. They want to contribute to a more compassionate world. They're just going about it in a very strange way.
Yeah, it's mediated through the popular culture in this disturbing way, and I just makes me frustrated. And I think then I realized like the conflation of self-identity, of queerness. Well, first it was like being a person of color, which she is half, was something she really started to identify with. And I was wanting to support her exploration of being mixed race and understanding where she came from, her heritage. But it seemed to go more than just like understanding herself, but more like exerting influence and power over others, right? And then I think the next thing was like queerness. So now identifying or sort of she had already said she was a lesbian, but I think that again that was not enough power. So I could see this like dabbling in queerness, and I think she just was kind of on social media saying she was non-binary but wasn't telling me. I thought, okay, you experiment in your peer group, and this is something you do there.
And what's that word? I can't pull it up right now. The overlapping of the minority categories, right? It's that that like the more of those you have.
The one upping of
they've got a term for it. Intersectional.
Yes.
Yeah.
again, like I see the value in that, but it just gets so distorted
Yeah.
in how how it's being used by people who are not terrible, young people who are not necessarily have had enough, their world is delimited by, certain things. They may not have had experiences that really give them an understanding of what that means. It's just theoretical. It's a theoretical thing for a lot of young people, right? So I wanted to support her exploration of ideas, but I could see these ideas were just becoming the sense of who she is. She was a big reader. She was reading all this advanced theory stuff, and in 8th and 9th grade, and I was like, okay, she's a curious intellectual, but I was like, ooh, I could sense this rigidity and this like, this intensity coming with it. And then I'm paying attention. I pay attention a lot to the social environment and to the landscape, and sensing, okay, so this younger generation is conflating your outsider status with ability to do justice, to be part of justice, right? Outsider status and fighting for justice. And but again, it's youth and young people who this is what they're meant to do.
And I hear you really making sense of the experience that she's having. You are taking into account all these beautiful personality traits, these amazing personality traits that she has grown up with, and how they're interacting with these influences, from the outside world to create this experience that, you can see it heading in a potentially negative direction. And you're also trying to support her experience in the world, right? Her figuring out who she is and knowing that this is part of the process she's got to go through.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in retrospect, and we learned some diagnoses later on that gelled with what I had known about her, and realized with her, the type of diagnosis she has, the criteria that she meets does not play well with the social environment of young people right now. It does not. It's not a healthy thing for her to interact in her group, in her generation. For her, some young people can do it and explore and then emerge, and then we have a lot of young people who are just psychologically just struggling so hard for so many reasons, and it does not lend that does not lend itself to healthy exploration in the wider world, because we've unlocked this whole Pandora's box and let all kinds of kids play in it, and many kids can't, and I feel like my daughter just needs, she always needed a wise adult to keep her from the edges of her, too far over the edge of herself, because she just could easily go down these paths and really overly reliant on her own perceptions, her own self. She really could not be parented, because she had no trust for anyone, any adult, in the household. And had this
can you expand on that a little bit? Can you expand on that a little bit?
She just,
couldn't be parented part.
Yeah, I mean, she was like 7 and picked up the parents' magazines that came in my house and looked up at me and said, "Oh, you're just reading this so you can make other people, your people could think you're a good parent." I was like, oh boy, and just this sense of like, she's got it. You have no idea what you're talking about. I mean, talk about, parent explaining. She did a lot of parent explaining. And it's like, and so I always, she definitely like looked up to adults outside of the home. And I think adults really gravitated to her and thought she was much more mature and sophisticated. And she is in many ways, in this very
Right.
way. But underneath, she needed some guardrails and somebody to help her to interrogate her own thoughts and ideas and her own beliefs.
Okay. And was that missing?
That was missing because she obviously didn't trust her dad and I. And certainly her adolescence coincided with this horrible upheaval with her dad and I. So I think she lost trust in us as people and her relationship and, more trust.
Can I ask, did you do, I'm guessing, but want to confirm that you two did split up.
Yes, we've split, we've divorced.
And how old was she when that happened?
So the initial breach, and sort of the blow up, what I call the blow up, she had just turned 9.
Okay.
Right after turn 9. And then, well, the divorce was finalized this year. So we're talking about a 10-year period, really. But sort of when we were in the home and we were struggling, and when she was in the home, it was 10 years, of her life, of being around this, very traumatic thing for her. Her father betrayed her trust too. I mean, he betrayed her trust immensely. But we recognized the mental health stuff. Started getting her assessed and treated. We had gotten a therapist initially. Then this was like literally a month before COVID, where the diagnoses were made, the referrals were being made.
She was asked what those were. Can I ask what the diagnoses were?
Borderline personality traits, because they don't officially diagnose teenagers. But when I heard that, I was like, and I looked, I was like, that's what's going on, or at least that kind of thing. That's the thing. Those are that gels, right? And ADHD, and depression, and anxiety. She showed signs of OCD, or developing OCD. Of course, there's also this overlap in that she identifies so strongly with others and her peers. And her best friend had significant childhood trauma and, OCD and PTSD, complex childhood trauma. And so, I think identifying with, again, being neurodivergent and the internet lets you self-diagnose for kids.
Yes.
Kids were really big to self-diagnosis.
Yes. Yes.
And so really that identity of being, depressed and traumatized and, she started saying we were abusive, and I'm like,
right.
We were a lot of things, but we weren't abusive. And so, again, this narrative's out there in the social media world.
Right. Yeah. Well, you say something in your
comments. And her best friend was a cutter, and then she picked it up. I think she sort of aligned with that.
Okay. Yeah. You talk about the children who are caught up in this. This is in one of your comments, are the neurodivergent ones, the ones who are so acutely sensitive to the world around them that they are driven into a kind of madness, the canaries in the coal mine that we are constructing, which, I was going to jump into this a little later in the conversation, but I think this is a good point to bring this up because, you describe these diagnoses, and, I think it's out there now that I'm pretty skeptical, when it comes to pathologizing, what our children are experiencing, because I believe what they are doing is they are highly sensitive children. And I think that comes from this highly attuned parenting style that I think was very intentional, and is a good parenting style. It's a sound parenting style, but maybe not in this time and place that we live in such a, chaotic, our systems are not serving us anymore. They create a lot of pain And we've got these highly sensitive kids that are just responding to the world around them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what it looks like, right? It looks like borderline personality disorder. It looks like ADHD. It looks like depression and anxiety. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah, no.
and
I for, she was self-diagnosing herself. And I said, well, and I believe that psychological intervention was what's needed. And honestly, I felt like, and when she started psychological intervention, it was like, they do this, what they do with teens and young adults is, children is CBT. And okay, yes, children need to learn new behavior, but I felt like at least my daughter really needed room to investigate herself, and her sense of self, because I think she had a more sophisticated sense of self and connection to herself than she was giving me credit. It's like, let's stop your behaviors.
right.
She needed freedom and safety to say it's okay to look into your thoughts and think about yourself more expansively and explore who you are, and things that I started doing in my 30s and 40s that helped me. I was a little bit of a neurotic type as a kid too, and I realized doing more of this work helped me to emerge less of a neurotic type. And so and I discouraged the medication. I said the therapeutic stuff will help, but I couldn't get good therapy. I couldn't. It was impossible. I couldn't find a therapist who was really going to recognize the deeper levels that she was operating on. And we had, as I was saying, she got a therapist, an older gentleman who's old school. So I think he was going to do that kind of like, let's challenge your world, let's challenge your perceptions. She did not like that.
Right.
And because the messages she's getting is that she needs to be affirmed. And he was old school. Let's push you to think differently. And so she said, I wouldn't go back. I don't want to go back to him.
I'm excited to share that this episode of Conversations Along the Way is sponsored by Dream School, which is brought to you by the same three psychoanalysts who co-host the transformational podcast, This Jungian Life. For those who may not know, Lisa Marciano, author of Motherhood, Finding and Facing Yourself, and one of the founders of the Gender Exploratory Therapy Association, or GETA, is one of these three co-hosts. If you've been following the Stoic Mom Project since its early days in the spring of 2022, you know that the This Jungian Life podcast inspired me to start paying attention to the symbolism and meaning in my own dreams. As a result, shortly after my daughter's 18th birthday, I had a series of dreams that brought me much comfort and peace around trusting both her journey and the foundation we have provided her. I've continued to spend time pondering my dreams and researching the symbols that appear, and basically just hoping that I'm, air quotes, doing it right. So I am incredibly excited to be starting my own year-long Dream School adventure, learning more directly from these brilliant Jungian analysts how to, as they say, decode the language of metaphor and symbol and harness the power of my unconscious wisdom. And I'll be sharing my experiences and insights along the way. If you're interested in joining me in Dream School, just go to thisjungianlife.com to enroll. Use the coupon code STOICMOM15 for 15% off your Dream School tuition. This is a significant savings, so once again, that's STOICMOM in all caps, followed by the digits 15. And I'll make sure to include this in the show notes, along with a link to This Jungian Life Dream School. How fun would it be to meet there in our dreams? And now, back to the conversation.
And I do want to get back to your story, right? And your transformation and your growth experience through this, and how this was reminiscent of the pain you'd already been experiencing. How old was she when she told you she was taking testosterone?
It was earlier this year.
Okay.
So when she's sort of saying I'm she finally came, she said, I'm non-binary, I'm trans non-binary. Okay, all right. Well, okay, this is getting deeper. And I made the decision, and this was like, start of COVID, to work really hard to be the soft place, the place she could trust and build that trust and build the container that she could be in, especially since like her dad kind of blew up so much of her life that she needed somebody to be consistent. And I needed, I worked really hard to be that consistent person she could trust. She didn't trust both of us, but she trusted me more than him, and I wanted to build on that. So I focused on that. I focused on doing the best I could to, have a good relationship, to repair breaches, to stay connected.
Yeah.
Right. Because I was like, okay, COVID put a pause on things. There's an opportunity here to reshape how we relate and reshape her trajectory. If I hone in on her now and hone in on her emotionally and building this connection, because it's like, she's leaving my house soon. She was ready to move out at 10. She's leaving my house really soon.
Right.
And I want to see this child coming back home for Christmas. Like, I don't want this child gone forever. And I worked to build that connection and support her as she made decisions and help her become a young adult. And she bloomed in so many ways. I was watching, this is good. She's growing, she's learning, she's maturing. She made a decision to take a year off and live on her own, not too far away. And I was like, I actually thought that was great because I wanted her to see the rest of the world and see outside of COVID world and see what it's like to live on your own and maybe humbled by, having to take care of daily life. And it's not theoretical, it's real. And so that happened early this fall. And she had a lot of bumps, sickness and stuff like that. But again, like, I wanted to be that parent, like, she could call and show up, even though she didn't call me back. Like, she doesn't call me back. It's like, and I was like, I'm going to show up.
Yes.
And I didn't let this, like, oh, I'm non-binary thing become too much of a thing. Except she had known how I felt. I'd already started talking about it before, about why I was concerned about kids in general about this. She didn't like it. She called, name calling and all that stuff. But I tried not to make it the thing. But the funny thing, and so I was feeling so optimistic in terms of her trajectory, that she was learning, she was growing, she was maturing. And then earlier this year, so, we had talked, we talked a little bit about dreams and, right. And,
yes.
And I had a dream out of nowhere. It felt like out of nowhere because I felt like, okay, she seemed like she was on a healthy, self-aware path. In this dream where she called me up and said, I'm going on testosterone. I'm on testosterone and I'm getting a mastectomy. And 2 days later, she calls me and she says, I want to go on testosterone and get a mastectomy.
Wow.
And it was, it wasn't an unfamiliar experience because
the dream, the
prophetic dream,
yes.
Because a month or two before my husband's affair was discovered, I could have told you, if you came to me and said he's cheating, or if the thought of it did not occur to myself at all, like, I would not have believed it. But I had a dream where I was lying in bed with him, and then suddenly my body changed into another woman's body, and I cried. I woke up crying.
Huh.
And again, no conscious idea of like something going on, but this unconscious information was there. And I don't know why, with my daughter, I don't know why I didn't. I guess I wasn't around her to really know what was going on. She'd moved out. I think with my ex, I knew there was like something had shifted in the relationship. It's so subtle, but that information. Um,
Well,
yeah,
and this would, people who analyze dreams, and this episode is going to be sponsored by Dream School. And that is one of the things that they say is, our dreams can give us this type of information,
Yeah.
and maybe it is a knowing in yourself that maybe is unconscious, but that your unconscious will communicate these things to you in dreams. But isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And one of the things that, during that period of time is that I started to really tap into that dream state, that pre-dream state. I mean, that just waking up state where my brain is open and it's seeing things. And I was getting so much information from my dreams. So much information. And one of the last dreams I had before, I was like, this just isn't going to be the it took me a while, but where this is just not going to work out well for me, is I had a dream about him and I driving in the car. I was in the back seat, he was driving, but in the second passenger front seat was another him. And so his sober, like, normal, mature self is driving, but I'm looking at the out of control, erratic, out of control self in the driver's seat. And I can't pay attention to the sober person and I'm looking at this person taking up the whole energy of the car and just being out of control. And I was like, that's who's driving the car. Sometimes the sane and sober and careful person is out, but who's really driving the car and who's taking up all the room is this out of control person. I said, there's nothing I could do about that. There's this other, and that's when I had this really profound realization that I'm trying to pretend that person's not there and he's there.
I got to get in another car.
I'm like, I got to get out of this car. I gotta get out. I had to drive my own car.
Yeah.
It was really a profound thing. I was like, this is it. This is important information. And so when my daughter told me that, it was like, oh, whoa. It was almost not a surprise, but it was also like, I don't even know. It was a shock, but not a surprise.
What was it like between the dream and her telling you? Once you had the dream, what was going on?
The dream, I actually told people in my life because we had I shared about with my current partner, my boyfriend, and my sisters. I was like, because I'd shared with them, oh, she says she's trans, this is what's going on. She was a boy. She just said I'm non-binary, and so and she said that means I'm trans. And I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't know that's what it meant, but okay. So they were aware, and so I said, oh my, I had this dream where she said she's going on testosterone, and I just let them know. And then 2 days, and I let it go, because when our dream, how many times are your dreams like literally replicated in life? Usually, my other dreams were symbolic. This one was
right.
A replay of that. And so it was just a few days later. It was intense. And I felt my body go into that initial trauma that when I first was, the times that my betrayals were unveiled. Because when my ex first, we were going through all the betrayals and the lies and the discoveries, I would drop 10 pounds in a week, 20 pounds in a
Mm.
week. And not because I wasn't eating, but because that's the body will do that. The body will go into burning your stored fat. And I was like, I couldn't feel like my butt wasn't cushioning me when I sat down, and like that kind of thing. I was like, this is crazy. And, my nails, my fingernails, your fingernails will stop, will do weird growth things. And so that, and I was having like physical reactions. There's a nerve called the vagus nerve that
Uh-huh.
controls, right, stress response. And I was getting these uncontrollable spasms in my neck. Like my body just took on this life of its own, spasming in my gut. Like my gut was like spasming, dry, like it was not my
Yeah.
body, right? And so I had gone through that enough to, the weight loss stuff and the nails and the hair. And when my daughter started saying that, I was like, oh, I lost some weight. Like it wasn't as acute, but like I was like, oh wow, my body just lost weight. Oh wow, my nails look really messed up. Dry heaving, fluttering in the chest.
Yes. Yes.
Like this panicky feeling,
Yeah.
not sleeping. It just came on. It's like I couldn't mindfully get myself in, not do it. My mindfulness wasn't going to work and whatever, I just was like, this is what my body's going to do right now. It's reacting to some really shocking things. And I'm probably not in a state to deal with it in any great way. And I just sort of recognized it for what it was. And it was like, I had to, with my ex, I had to learn to take care of myself because I felt like I was going to die if I didn't. And it was
Right.
it's like I couldn't sacrifice my body anymore. And so it became really important that I take care of my body because middle-aged, like your body's does not bounce back as much. And so like I have to live my life because if I get sick and frail from this, it's nothing good will come of that.
So when it's doing its thing, right? When you see the trauma response in your body, the weight loss, the nails and such, what does taking care of it through that period look like? I would imagine there's just some allowing of what's happening. And what else?
Yeah, I mean, there's some acceptance of I'm not going to be in my best self. And noticing that I could have some kind of reaction in a situation that, or some response or inability to respond the way I normally would in a situation that could be damaging. So I had to be really just, patient and careful about things. I knew who I could trust to vent and yell and just rage. And my wonderful patient partner and my sisters were there to like let me unleash and give me that. And
it can look it's dramatic, right?
Dramatic.
There's like caning, and there is literally being on your knees. You said laying
really
on the floor, right? That this is part of it. It's so painful.
Yeah. And I learned not to be embarrassed by it, embarrassed by that happening. That I was like, at least, I work from home, so I'm not in my office, so I could be private. But I could also be real. And I decided that, sharing with people that were interacting with me at work and saying like, there's just some really difficult stuff happening right now. And, I'm not at my best, was important, and having those people at work that I could do that with. And just being gentle with myself, like, being like, okay, I'm going to let go of like X, Y, and Z because I'm not I just don't have the capacity. And it's not like I can muscle through it. It's not good for me to muscle through it. I learned, I used to be a muscler and I can do it sometimes, but it's not good for me. It's not, it makes
It'll
me,
catch up.
it catches up.
You're just postponing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it I went through it a lot, very quickly, mostly because it was like nothing, I wasn't repeatedly slammed with yet new information, like with my ex. Yeah. So I had that period of like, and I did contact my ex to talk about it because we were, philosophically on the same page. But again, like I realized it's like trying to like wring, water from a dry towel. It just wasn't going to be good for me either. So I had to go through a lot of like relearning of like my boundaries and what's good for me and what's not good for me. And of course I reached out to, I have a therapist, and then I also contacted somebody who like is trained to coach parents through these things and help them. Just as a way of like, okay, I'm going to take care of me because I need to find me to make this work, to make good decisions. And I think
having somebody that can understand what you're going through is so key. Yeah.
And then also, right, taking on this role that my daughter is alienated themselves from her father at this point, and recognizing just can't be there for her. So I'm her only person other than her best, her friends and stuff.
You're the only mature, responsible adult in the room.
Yes. And she trusts me, like, over that year and a half or 2 years of COVID, she started to trust me. She started to see me as somebody who would have her and look out for her, and appreciating me. She appreciated me. It was beautiful. She started recognizing, like, Mom, I thought it was, I see that you were struggling because of Dad and things Dad was doing, not because, and that she really appreciated that I was wanting to be her parent. And I was there for her, and I was going to.
She saw the effort that you were.
She saw the effort. We didn't always agree, but she saw the effort, and that was important. So I wanted to make sure that she still could see that effort, and that I wasn't going to blow that. And I mean, I sort of made that decision that like this child is going to be who they are until, for the rest of their life. And so what do I want to, who am I going to be to them?
Yeah.
What is the options? What are the options? Not a lot of options. It's not the way I would, want it to be. It's not the way I imagine it to be, but what are my options? And I had to choose. This is the option I chose.
And when you say this, this is the option I chose. Can you tell me more about that option? What do you mean by that?
Above all else, no matter, they're entitled to live their life and make their mistakes. This is their life. Now when they moved out and turned 18, I was like, I'm off the hook. I'm off the hook. And I was looking to that day way long. I was just like, I'm off. I have no choice. This child is going to not want anything from me, really much from me. I'll have to be off the hook. I have to let myself off the hook. And so, what's the role I'm going to play? It's going to be, I hope to be, when stuff hits the fan, she'll call me, or, that there's in herself, even if she doesn't call me, she knows that somebody's she's holding the care and protection in her heart. She has that feeling of care and protection, that she can carry with her. Because I think, I take a lot from my own mom. And I think coming to understand what my own mom needs to be as a 40-something-year-old woman. And, she's not terribly, sophisticated about parenting, in like the, or modern. I say she's fairly sophisticated, I think, but not modern. And she's very intuitive about what she does. But old school, right? Not She didn't study it.
Right.
But so,
right. Because you didn't do that back then.
yeah,
You
don't read
just,
books.
right.
But like my sisters and I are so deeply indebted and close to our mom, even though she drives us crazy. And it's because she still shows up as the person who cares about us the most.
Yeah.
And how much I relied on that feeling in my struggles in life. There's somebody out there who cares about me, who will have my back if I go to them, who's putting herself and her comfort aside for, and maybe sometimes too much. I mean, that's a whole other thing, but that I know that she's there, and I know I have a home. There's a place that's home.
Yes.
There are people who are home to me, and both, my mom and my dad, my sisters are those people. And I want to make sure that closeness, that feeling is there for my children. We're a smaller family. I grew up with extended family. We don't have the extended family. They don't have the extended family. So what can I do to make sure there's a home in their hearts? And that's what I hope to do with my child, with my older child. That's what I'm trying to do still, because it's all I can give them. I can't think of anything else. I don't have a lot of money. And that my daughter, and then my daughter know, I want my daughter to know that I will give up things for them. And I think because they don't feel that from their dad, right? And so like, okay, you need to know that there's somebody who's unconditionally gonna be looking out for you. And so it's that.
Can you give an example of how you communicate that? What is something that you do or say that you're hoping communicates that to your daughter?
I think my daughter sometimes will like not. This is a complicated thing. I think my daughter sometimes wants to assume the worst of me and both, because somehow it validates her sense of just being lost and alone in the world. And so whenever I catch her kind of saying, she was sick, I jump in and say, okay, I'm gonna, do X, Y, and Z. You don't have to do this alone. I'm gonna come by your house. I'm gonna bring these things. I'm gonna call you even though you don't call me back. I'm gonna show the concern that you're important. That I'll stop work and come to you, in the ways that I can. I'm not going to sabotage and sacrifice myself above all. But in those moments, is there a way that I can show her that it's not going to inconvenience me to check in on her and be there for her? And with, she's going to start college. She took this year, and then, money was a big conversation, and there's a lot of nervousness on my part. And I tried to impress upon her how expensive it was. And then I started feeling like she was feeling like she didn't deserve it. And I wanted to make sure she knew that I was going to figure it out, that we have people and resources who love her, who are going to help her. And I'll be there. She's so used to do, she did her applications on her own, all this stuff. And I'm like, I'll help you figure this part out, So I guess I decided to focus on where I can show up. I made clear my concerns about what her life's other decisions are going to how they're going to, I believe they're dangerous for her, and too soon for her to make those kinds of decisions, and hopefully I'm trying to focus her on other parts of life that she has to pay attention to. Her education, her skills, her connections to her family. Those are the things I can do something about, and that I can still be part of. And that's how we're staying connected. Maybe I should tell you about the dream that I did have about her. Right.
So this was okay. Was this is this the one you talk about in the comment?
Yeah.
Okay. The particularly violent
dream. Let me get the charger on my computer real quick.
Okay.
I had this dream. It had lots of details. I'll try not to, it's just one of the, I go through these periods of having these really vivid, highly emotional dreams where there's a lot of anger, a lot of rage. All those just big feelings are in the dream, where I'm just feeling it, I had this dream where I was at a work meeting conference with like two of my colleagues, and we're trying to have like a tete-a-tete meeting, and it happens to be in the the alumni house of my college. And so it's this like cottage thing, and so there's like people shuffling in and out, and there's so much going on, I can't focus, and I'm attuned to like stuff that's happening around me, and then I get the sense of somebody dangerous in the midst of the room. And so I really can't focus, and I recognize them as like a serial killer. And I'm like, well, hold on, I'm trying to draw everybody's attention to the serial killer, but people are trying to do their business meeting, when people are like, and I'm like, I'm tailing the serial killer, trying to keep him from doing anything, trying to alert people. I'm like, like, hey. And people are like, okay. And then they go back to what they're doing. And this is sort of what it's, felt like for parents of trans identified child. It's like, hold up, hey, there's this emergency happening. And people are like, that's okay. And so I'm just so frustrated. I'm like screaming, like seeing that he's stirring stuff up, and he's attacking people in different rooms, and I'm still running through trying to draw everybody's attention. And I'm screaming like, he's gonna kill us all. No one's paying attention to me, and finally I start wrestling him. I'm trying to hold him down and screaming, he's gonna kill us all. Like, I'm trying so hard to hold this slippery, and it's slippery. He's very slippery. It's slipping out, and he's smiling, he's looking, and he's laughing at me. And I can't hold him down, and I'm just burning my energy, burning my breath. And then finally I'm like, I have to let go. I have to save myself. He's gonna go do his rampage out here. I will let go, and I'm gonna leave this building.
Sorry, that gives me chills. Okay.
Right. And he lets me go. It's almost, we've developed this relationship, right, in this grappling. He's like, okay, thanks, like, I'll leave you alone. I'm gonna go do my thing over here. And so I walk out, and I'm walking down this path, and I see he exits the building, and he's doing a rampage like alongside me, and people going left and right. And I look over, and there's a park bench with some older gentlemen kind of had been peacefully playing some chess or something. And he comes running by, and I was like, just leave them alone. Leave them alone. Okay. They haven't been doing anything. And he's like, okay. And, you know, I go to my car and I'm watching this mayhem. You know, it's me and these two gentlemen sitting who are just like in, you know, unscathed. And, you know, and I woke up and I was like, I'm fighting something I can't control. I can't hold on to this. I can't keep this thing in the bag. You know, I'm putting all my energy and it's killing me. It's going to kill me. I'm going to waste my energy on this thing that I can't control. And there's so much I can do. I can do other things that don't make me feel like a failure. And it's hard to say that about your kid, like, oh, you know, I can't do anything for my child, or I can't do anything. Yeah, I can't stop this thing that I believe is going to destroy them from destroying them. And maybe it won't, and maybe it won't. You know, I let in room that maybe it won't destroy them.
Right.
There's going to be they're having a transformation.
Yes.
And
Destroy implies some finality that I think we need to be careful about.
Yeah.
Like, yes, she might create a lot of pain for herself, some intense pain for herself. And she's got a model of resilience and capacity.
Yeah.
To grow.
Yeah. And I allowed myself to see she is a growing person. She's not stuck. She's trying to figure herself out. She's got a lot of her own wisdom that I want to trust. You know, and I don't want to not see those parts, that she's an incredible person. And that even if, you know, okay, she harms her body irrevocably, she has other things in the world that can maybe bring her into another, you know, a fulfilled self, a self that she, you know, that she can be. Because nobody's, you know, we all have to make compromises about, you know, we don't end up with all the, you know, in the state that we want to be in as adults. You know, we have to work with what we got, and some things we kind of destroy in our, you know, our past, we kind of sabotage ourselves, and then you got to move forward with what you've got left. And that's what I'm hoping for her, is that, you know, this might be the worst mistake of her life, but she has things that can make her life still beautiful and wonderful. And if it ends up being, you know, and I let it in space, like I've seen and I know of trans adults who find themselves happy and successful and peaceful, and maybe that's available to her. I mean, I don't, you know, there's a lot of unknowns about the developing self for kids who do this, right?
You know, you're there's so much in there. I kind of want to go back to the dream for a minute, and then we'll catch up to this point again. What an amazing dream. Like, if you would be willing to write that up.
I did. I actually woke up and I did write it up.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I did have.
You described the battle that I feel like I'm trying to help people see, that when you are in the fight, you're feeding the fight, right? Like, he was ready to wrestle with you and kill you, but you had this relationship, and when you let go, it let go of you, right? You can free yourself from it. And I know, and I understand the moms that think that don't want to be freed, right, until they free their child. I see it. I get it. I thought that was going to be my fight. You know, but that's the different relationship I'm talking about. You know, you can choose to fight, or you can choose to free yourself and have a different experience, and maybe model that different experience for your kid. You know, I have, Marcus Aurelius says the best revenge is to not be like your enemy. And it's interesting, even the word revenge now doesn't relate. I can't relate to it, because
Right.
I don't have enemies. I'm so unlike my enemy that I don't have enemies. I don't want enemies. I want to understand other people's experience, right? And the more we can work to understand each other, I think the more peace we create in the world. You chose peace in that dream. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see other people experiencing peace in the midst of the chaos, right? This is heaven and hell here on earth. Which are you going to live in? Yeah. And so it's really just, it's an invitation, there is another way. And it's, if you feel you got to fight the fight, that's okay, and it's a choice.
And it's a choice. Yeah. There's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And, with my ex, there were these moments where I intentionally chose to fight a certain fight. Mm-hmm. And I knew, I realized there would be, nothing was guaranteed, but I was like, this feels like I need to fight for this thing. And so going in intentionally to do it as well, discovering that there's option there to also not fight, and to return to, and I think the turn is to like, well, what, I can't fight. I don't have the energy. The fight, I don't have the power to fight. What else is there? And the other option is, then what is this going to teach me? What am I going to get out of this? Yeah. I'm not going to get this thing that I really, really want. What else am I going to get out of this? Well, there's things you can get out of it. And that's what I learned with my ex, where I said, this is like the worst feeling, worst destruction, self-annihilation that I have ever felt. This is like, I felt annihilated. I would never want anyone to feel like that. That kind of betrayal and that kind of pain. And but I don't want it to be the story that I was annihilated. I wanted it to be like, well, a friend of mine at the time had said, I'm sorry, this is your story. And something clicked, and she said, and it made me think, this is my story. This is my story, the whole story. It's my story. It's not somebody else's story. I make it my own, and I'm going to accept the whole story. I can't pretend that this thing isn't happening, and I can't, but I also have, it's being written for me in many ways. I can't write the whole thing. So, what are the parts that I can write for myself, to give myself back something? And owning the story, I think, was for me the not denying that this was happening, and that there was something I couldn't prevent, or I couldn't change.
There's outside circumstances.
There's things I couldn't change. Yeah.
Yep. The world is going to happen.
The world's going to happen. I'm not special that like things aren't going to happen to me. And, and what am I going to feed? Because I could, if I tuned into the things that were good, I tuned into things that were important and useful in that situation. And there were little treasures of things like, first of all, finding out the truth. Truth to me is a treasure. So when I found out the truth about my life, even though it was painful, I was like, truth is so important. And because in the back of my head, there was a sense that it wasn't like I was being deceived, and then when you find truth, you're like, I'm so glad I'm not a cloud of deceit that I was walking around in. And so little things like that. And I think, you know, with my daughter the same way, is like, she's not a hot mess. She's not only a hot mess, she's a person who's growing and is going to have her hot messes forever, and just like everybody else. And so I can't see her just as this problem.
Right. That needs fixing or
That needs
saved.
fixing. It's you know, she's a young adult. She's an adult. If it was
What message does that communicate to her if you are always trying to fix her life?
yes, and I think that's the value, I think, above all else with her and my kids, is that you have to own your life yourself.
Yes.
You can't outsource it. And I think that's part of what she had done for you know, she's was doing for a lot of her childhood, is outsourcing her identity. And maybe, you know, there's going to be a time where she's not going to outsource it. And
well, and you're modeling that for her. You're owning your story. So she's going to have a model of how to do that. So few people have a model for how to do that. You know, that it's the world we live in. We project it all out. We don't own our story. When we feel terrible, we want outside things to blame for feeling terrible, instead of taking responsibility for changing that, for doing the work it takes to change that.
Yeah, and you know, I think owning the pain of it, and seeing that I could live with it. It's hard, but
That's
it's
really
like
profound. Yeah. And again, I think difficult to convey for people to understand, because we have culturally, we learn that pain is bad. We shouldn't feel pain, instead of recognizing that pain is part of life and it's information. It's important information.
It is important information.
Yeah. And we want to, of course, we want to shield our children from pain, you know, but they're gonna have pain. Yeah. And I know this is extreme and it's intense. And it's the time we're in. This is the problem set of the day. This is the world is going to happen, you know. And how do we equip or empower as best as we can? Because that's what we've got within our power, right? Like you said, what can I do? You know, I can do my best to be an attachment figure, right? Somebody she can count on. Make sure she knows she's not in this alone, and then do my best to give her the confidence and faith in herself that she can handle anything.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. You know, that giving kids their faith in themselves. You know, I think that's what we, as a culture, you know, and this outsourcing of, you know, is all these ways that we outsource, like, who we are, and tell our kids to outsource who they are. And as parents can enable them or disable them from having faith in themselves is so important. Because I think that's the make or break. I see it, you know, with adults who can't really tap into, as an adult myself, you know, that struggle. If you you can find some deep faith in yourself, you know, it's not the superficial. There's this deep faith in yourself that you know something about yourself, and you know something about your experience in the world, and that you can trust. It. It takes time.
It takes time. It takes pain.
And it takes pain.
And it's faith is something that was kind of new for me. That was a gift of this, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That there came a point where I had to trust.
Yeah.
I just had to trust that, you said at 18, you were kind of off the hook. At that point, you don't have control anymore. You have to trust that you gave them the best foundation you could and that they've got the capacity to figure it out, figure out what they need. Yeah. Humanity, being human. And we're not so different from animals after all, right?
Yeah.
Like, that was something.
Yeah, there's they sort of, animals, they learn things, of course, as they grow up, but they have so much to, it's wired in them to do, and we are too.
It's tuning into that, though.
Tuning into that. Yeah. Tuning into that. We are wired to do things that serve us, and you gotta tune into it.
And that's why the pain's important. That's what that pain is communicating. Listen to the pain. Yeah.
The pain, if you can let it take you use it to take the story off. The story that you're telling yourself, and change the story if you let it be.
Let it guide.
Let it guide. Let it guide. Right. Let it guide.
You've been listening to Conversations Along the Way, part of the Stoic Mom Project. If you're interested in connecting with other growth-oriented, non-affirming moms, consider joining the SMP Online Community Center. This is a private, vetted community hosted on Mighty Networks and created specifically for moms who share this circumstance. For more information and to express interest in joining, please visit the SMP Community Center tab at stoicmom.substack.com. Thanks for listening, and always remember, humans have amazing capacity for overcoming adversity and healing. And I'm pretty sure you're human.